The Southern Railway Z-Class 080 tank was quite a quirky locomotive, if ever there was one. Thanks to the efforts of a small third-party developer called Steam Loco Collection, we can now potter about with the Z in TS Classic. Incidentally, this is the first time I've reviewed anything from SLC, and I must also mention that this video is not sponsored by the developer. Feel free to play a drinking game by taking a preferably non-alcoholic drink for every time I say Z throughout this video. The Z-Class was released for TS Classic in late December 2024, and is available to purchase from SLC's website for £17.50, or $41.05 NZD, at full price. That's getting close to the limit of how much I'm prepared to pay for a TS add-on, and indeed, I initially considered the price to be a bit steep. But as you'll see later, it's kind of made up for by the sheer amounts of features and model variations you get in the pack. And now for a brief history on the Z-Class. 8 of these engines were built at Brighton Works in 1929, to the design of Richard Maunsell. At the time, the Southern Railway needed powerful tank engines to shunt trains in marshalling yards or bank trains up steep inclines. Apparently, the Zs were initially going to be built at Ashford Works, but this was changed to Brighton because Ashford was busy rebuilding the ex-SECR K-Class tank engines as U-Class 260 tender engines. Besides their wheel arrangement, the Zs were also unusual for the use of 3 cylinders, with Walshart's valve gear for the outside cylinders and a custom valve gear for the inside cylinder. Meanwhile, Sid was very confused as to why one of Zack's classmates had nicked his coaches, but he never found out why the Southerner did this, much to his frustration. Throughout their lives, the Z-Class worked at Eastleigh, Exmouth Junction, Norwood Junction, and other big yards in the southern region. Between December 1942 and May 1943, 3 of them were even loaned to the War Department and saw service in Scotland. Towards the end of their lives, all 8 Zs could often be found banking trains on the short, but steeply graded section between Exeter St David's and Exeter Central. They were withdrawn in 1962, but very sadly, and despite an attempt at saving 30952, none of this class has survived into preservation. The Z is another addition to the small, but not insignificant, collection of 080 locomotives available for TS. 2 examples of other 080s you can get are the London and North Western Railway G2 by Mesh Tools, and the North Eastern Railway T2/LNER Q6 by Victory Works. Both of these locomotives are available on Steam. As for what you get with the Z-Class add-on from SLC, there's a lot to get through, but we'll start off with the liveries. The selection is as follows: Southern Railway lined black, Southern Railway unlined black, in clean or weathered states, War Department grey, or if these engines were Visage fans, War Department faded to grey, British Railways unlined black, in clean or weathered states, and a second variant of BR Black, this time with AWS fitted. As an aside, there's something about the Z that reminds me of the United States Army Transportation Corps S-100 class 060 tank, of all locomotives. Both the Z and S100 have their valve gear driving the third axle, and it looks a little strange as a result. To my knowledge, the only depiction of the S100 we've ever seen in TS is this, quite frankly, awful model made by Iron Horse House. This thing came with the old Forum Peninsula route, and one of its many flaws is its complete lack of a cab interior. Thinking back to the Z, there's a long list of features on this thing, as listed on SLC's website, not to mention an insanely in-depth manual as well. The features include, but are certainly not limited to, 3D number plates, a fully detailed cab interior, numerous cab camera views, and fully animated valve gear, not just outside the frames but inside as well, followed by an opening smokebox door, the ability to customize model details using the locomotive's number in the scenario editor, simulated steam brake and vacuum brake operation, and, of course, the ability to change from simple to advanced mode, or vice versa, in driver mode. In my opinion, the most noteworthy feature is the opening smokebox door, something I had never seen on any of the other steam locomotives in my TS collection before getting the Z. I know that it's not a new feature, since the Bossman Games Black 5 and SLC's own Southeastern and Chatham Railway H-Class already have it, but I still find it impressive. In any case, the Z's smokebox door can be opened by holding down the Z key, how appropriate, and closed by holding down Ctrl Z. This can be useful for setting up a shed scene, maybe something with a ladder propped up against the smokebox and a cleaner standing on said ladder. As for the overall model, I think SLC did a pretty good job at recreating the Z class and her rather odd proportions. The textures are better than I was expecting, but still a little bit shiny. As I said earlier, the Z comes with both simple and advanced modes, although I use the former out of personal preference. If you want to learn how to run the Z in advanced mode, I recommend watching the tutorial that Dark DJ made. I will include a link to said tutorial in the description. I found that the reverser is quite sensitive to keyboard inputs when you're in simple mode, but it apparently works more like a traditional steam reverser in advanced mode. On my first attempt at driving a Z along the Salisbury Mineral Tramway, the engine wasn't really building up steam as she went along. At the time of that run, I stupidly forgot that the Zs aren't all that suitable for longer / more continuous running. These engines are much better for shunting or short distance runs, and with that information in mind, I didn't bother trying my usual endurance test from Castle Douglas to Newton Stewart. In any case, on the second attempt at driving a Z on Salisbury, the locomotive steamed much better than I was expecting. I think it's because I had the reverser around a 22 or 23% cutoff, and the fire mass between 80 and 85% on the F4 heads-up display. But regardless of whatever I was doing, practice makes perfect. When I got this shot of Zack crossing the River Ura, near Dalbeatty, I could clearly hear the safety valves blowing off from about half a mile away. It was the same volume I'd expect if the locomotive was right next to me. And incidentally, while making this review, I had a few instances where the safety valves were constantly blowing off, and that got a bit annoying. Based on what I've seen from the Z class, I have a good first impression of Steam Loco Collection as a developer, and I'm interested to see whatever he brings to the game next. Although the Z had a few issues upon initial release, some of them have since been patched, and despite not really being able to use the Z on the kind of runs I prefer, I'm still happy to have this unique tank engine in my TS collection. I think she deserves a 7 out of 10.